Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and that's called cloud architecture optimization that will bring value back to the business. And this is, in essence, looking at a problem that I think is systemic out there in the people who have done cloud deployments. We're not necessarily optimizing those deployments for the business. And so therefore, we're seeing a couple of disturbing things. Money is not coming back. The ROI is not coming back to the business that I think that the industry promised enterprises they would see, and I think enterprises expected. But unfortunately, there's a few folks out there, lots of folks out there actually, that are making mistakes in doing their cloud deployment and not necessarily getting the optimization or the return of value that's coming back to the business from the use of cloud computing. So we're going to kind of focus on that at a very high level, but also talk about the symptoms that we're seeing out there that are causing this problem. So let's get started. So this is really about organizations neglecting optimization. So we're not asking ourselves, as we rolled out into cloud computing very quickly, and certainly during the pandemic, we zoomed out with our cloud solutions and tried to get as much on the public clouds as we could, because we view that as a safe harbor for a lot of the applications and workloads that were, quite frankly, in data centers, and many of which that were closed for quarantines. And so we saw a mad dash into the cloud over the last 3 or 4 years. And it certainly was occurring before the pandemic, accelerated during the pandemic, and it's still kind of accelerating today. And so we saw a lot of mistakes being made. Number one, we had technology biases that were there. In other words, we were picking technology. We're usually using pre-existing relationships that already had with technology providers, vendors, things like that. So sometimes people just went ahead with a cloud provider that was offered by whatever technology provider that they had the strongest relationship with. In many instances, that may have turned out to be okay. In other instances, it turned out to be not optimized for the workloads and the data sets they were moving into the cloud. So in other words, they were picking technology for the wrong reasons. The other thing is not knowing about technology options that are out there. And in other words, just not having a wider view of what technologies are available in the wild in terms of cloud computing, different cloud services, different best of breed technologies that can leverage, and also not necessarily opening up their portfolio to accept other cloud computing services. If you think about it, the movement to multi-cloud is a response to that. In other words, we're leveraging best of breed technologies to bring the best optimized technologies into the business, and doing that with a multi-cloud deployment. That's kind of what's pushing everybody into multi-cloud. And the third thing related to the second thing is not considering the options. In other words, we're not only knowing about the options, we're not considering them. So we're not asking critical questions as why are we on this particular database? Why are we on this particular application development platform? Why are we using this AI, artificial intelligence system, versus the other ones that are out there? And that's leading to some under-optimized architectures, which is leading to what we're seeing in the polls, where not enough value is coming back to the business from utilization of this technology. So keep in mind that the concept of value kind of looks like this. We can use too few resources and have minimum delivered value because we're not stepping up in terms of leveraging technology the way we should. We can use too many resources and therefore have a minimum value delivered. So in other words, is we're spending too much money and still not see value come back to the business because the value is being depleted by the amount of money and cash that's going out. So we're looking for this happy medium, maximum delivered value or fully optimized value that's going to exist within the enterprise. And that's hard to find, but if you think about it, we're talking about getting to this middle space. We're able to do a maximized delivered value and do so with the right amount of resources and the appropriate resources to meet the needs. So let's look through a cloud native example of this. Cloud native being containers and Kubernetes and those sorts of things. And we're not going to get into the details behind that, but just it's an approach, it's an architecture, it's a way of doing something. We're able to mimic the capabilities of the cloud to build applications that are able to scale to the needs of the business. And it kind of looks like this. You have a cloud native value curve where you have under optimized, fully optimized, and under optimized that we just mentioned. In other words, we're spending not enough money, just right amount of money, and too much money. And the costs go up as the time goes in. So again, we're looking for that fully optimized state. How do we get to that? So using cloud native as an example, we have the fully loaded cost of leveraging cloud native systems, and that's always going to be going up because the costs are going to increase over time. So over the cost increase or the burn in leveraging cloud native technology, we're seeing soft values that will grow with that spend, but eventually deplete over time. Now, what soft values are versus hard values, and we'll talk about those next, are going to be the values within the business that are a bit more difficult to define. In other words, agility, the ability to scale the business, the ability to change some market shares, change into changing markets. All these sorts of things are very important to making businesses run. But as we go through the spending on any kind of an architectural approach, in this case, cloud native, the soft values are eventually going to fall off. If we look at the same on the hard values, which are costs that are easy to define, in other words, savings that occur by leveraging this technology, it's a bit more even tracking. So in other words, as we get into fully loaded costs leveraging cloud native technology and it starts growing up and to the right, the hard values are the real savings, such as cost savings and operation savings and people savings and all those sorts of things we're able to do by leveraging technology, kind of track along with it. And the reason I'm using these two things as an example is because we can see different behaviors in utilizing this particular technology, in this case, cloud native, but it could be anything. It could be artificially intelligent-based systems. You could be building a business intelligence systems. This is really kind of an application architecture platform that we're moving to. And this is how you kind of track the values. In other words, as your spending increases over time, what is going to be the hard value and what is going to be the soft value? Hard value being costs that are easy to determine. In other words, money that's coming back directly from us that we're saving on using, say, an analog that exists within our data center or something like that, versus the soft value, which is going to be agility, things that are more difficult to measure, but typically are going to be far more valuable than the hard values that are out there. So keep this in mind when you consider the costs. So we have to kind of ask the question, are we leaving money on the table by not optimizing these systems? And in some instances, I think we are, because keep in mind, in this case, not leveraging containers and overusing containers, we're under-optimized, and then under-optimized by not leveraging containers, under-optimized by leveraging overusing containers. And we're looking for that optimized path where something is going to be approaching an optimized state where the amount of money that we're able to put into the investment in this technology is going to come back to the business at least tenfold. And that may be a high bar for many of the organizations, but kind of that's what you need to expect out there. That as I put money into my technology, I invest, I build these various systems, that we need to prove that the value is going to come back to the business in one way, shape, or form. And in many instances, we're leaving money on the table. We're leaving money on the table because we're unable to get to a state where we're approaching something that's going to be fully optimized. By the way, you're never going to be fully optimized. It's something you're almost never going to achieve, but we're approaching something that is near being fully optimized. So the maximum amount of value is coming back to the business based on the investments that are being made in the technology. So kind of keep that in mind. So this should be the question that comes at the end of every architectural exercise, whether you're doing a microarchitecture, or just building a few cloud native applications and putting them in a cloud environment, or you're doing a macro architecture where we're looking holistically at what an enterprise architecture is, utilization of cloud, looking at things that are more strategic. Someone should stand up and really kind of ask the question, are we leaving money on the table? Is this solution that we're building under optimized? And if it is, what are the proper solutions? What are the technologies that we should leverage that are going to get us to a more optimized state? Keep that in mind. So kind of changing gears around the whole optimization thing, repatriation has kind of come back and is becoming a thing. And the reason for this, and in doing some writing and speaking on repatriation, the interest in this is rising. And what repatriation is in essence, we put something on the cloud, typically using lift and shift. We're finding it costs us too much to run things on the cloud for that particular workload and that particular data set. And then we're moving it back to a more traditional systems that exist within usually an enterprise data center, but it could be a managed service provider or a co-location provider. It's just not existing on the cloud. So this gets into the optimization test, because the reason from 2008 to today that the interest in repatriation has inflected and the enterprise cloud costs have remained relatively the same, perhaps even decreased a little, is that traditional hardware costs have slowly come down over time. And so it's giving cloud computing a run for its money. So folks who took an application that cost maybe $100,000 a month to run on the enterprise, in the enterprise data center fully loaded, personnel, maintenance, tools, all those things included, and then moved into the cloud and found that it cost $150,000 to run the same application workloads and data sets in the cloud, are asking the question, well, we didn't really gain something by doing this. We're spending more in the cloud than we did on premise. And certainly, if the cost of the technology that exists in the on-premise systems, such as hard drives, storage systems, compute, even the data centers themselves is being reduced in cost, which it is. Traditional hardware costs are coming down. Then we have a decision to make. In other words, we're re-optimizing the platform that we're going to run this application on based on the fact there are changing economic market conditions. And typically a more realistic look at that is going to be $100,000 to run this thing in the month. We're going to move it to the cloud. Maybe it costs $80,000, but that may go up to $120,000 over the next 5 years. And then suddenly the cost of running the same application workloads in the traditional data center may go down to $50,000. So lots of decisions are being made in moving these things to different platforms, and they're not really being made around emotional decisions around the fact that they don't like cloud. Certainly cloud computing is always going to have a place in this game, is that for some workloads that in order to optimize them, to bring the most value back to the business, they need to be put back on premise and leveraged on more traditional systems. And it's okay to do that. Obviously, there's some cost to that. You have to migrate the applications back and also have the worst discussion in the world with your boss, the fact that, well, how we moved things to cloud 5 years ago, well, we're moving things back to the data center now. Lots of instances are occurring to this, and what's happening is normally when there's repeatable things that they do in the cloud, such as just storing lots of data and doing the same processing where there is no advantage to running in the cloud versus enterprise systems, and lots of product-based systems are doing this today. So someone that's offering a cloud service that may be hosting the cloud service on a public cloud provider itself may find, since they're doing the same thing in a scalable way, that they can do the same thing in a cheaper way with their traditional on-premise systems. So kind of keep that in mind. We're finding value in opening up our mind and looking at different opportunities to host these applications on the platforms that are there. But there's trade-offs in doing this. Let's talk about that. So again, hard drive prices have dropped significantly over the last 10 years. And the growth of storage has exploded. And so this is driving where cloud storage pricing has creeped up a bit. So from 2010 to today, so traditional hard drive storage pricing could be diminishing over time. Cloud storage pricing may be inflecting depending on what cloud provider you're using and the service that you're using. They're always going to be different. So I'm just looking at an aggregate of what everybody seems to be behaving at the time. Storage growth, the demand for storage is going to inflect, and therefore we're making a decision, the fact that we have cheaper alternatives to run things on premise than run things in the cloud, and therefore hopefully save buckets of money in making this happen. That's what's in front of us these days. However, we need to kind of look at the writing on the wall in terms of where the market's going. So even if we do repatriate some systems to the on-premise systems, the R&D spending on cloud and cloud-related technologies has inflected. If you look at about 90% of the spending that's out there, and you can look at the since these are publicly traded companies and what they're spending on R&D for the cloud-based technology versus traditional technology, is on the cloud-based systems. And so there's not a lot of R&D love and investments that's coming down to these more traditional systems. And so if you're looking for features and function growth, if you're looking for innovation, that's typically not going to be occurring on the on-premise traditional systems. That's typically going to be occurring in the cloud. And that may be a reason to stay with the cloud. Again, as I mentioned, typically things you're going to look to repatriate are going to be systems that do repeatable and common things, massive amounts of storage, massive amounts of compute, things like that. Things that really kind of aren't innovative unto themselves. They just repeat the same process over and over again. However, in moving to cloud, we have access to lots of very sophisticated high-level services, AI, business intelligence, management and monitoring systems that are far superior than things you're going to find on traditional systems that run in a data center. That's because for the last 10 years, that's where the investment has been occurring. So in many instances, we're being forced to march to the cloud because the rug's being kind of pulled out from under us on these traditional systems because the investment's occurring in the cloud, but not all the time. Again, for certain workloads, it's going to make more sense to run them in the data center than in us on the cloud, and vice versa. You have to look at each individual solution, each individual problem, to see what the appropriate platform is going to be to host that particular solution that, again, returns the most value back to the business. So increasing risk to traditional systems is going to be there. So you may find that even though you're repatriating a workload and repatriating data, because it's going to be cheaper to run there. There may be a reason not to do that because you're able to find more innovative value in the cloud-based systems you're currently hosted on. So this is the fun game of enterprise architecture. We have to look at the needs of the existing systems now, but also look at where they're going to be growing and what services they're likely going to need and what's the value of those services. And then bring those equations and bring those data points into your value assessment of your existing architecture to figure out what platform is going to be optimal for the workloads that you're there. So this is about understanding what the business value is of cloud computing really at the end of the day. We're doing a cloud architecture, and kind of the way I like to approach it is that you should assume that value workloads and data sets are going to be in the cloud unless there's some reason, optimization reason typically, that makes them not a good candidate to move to the cloud. And so this is going to be a difficult question for many of the organizations out there because they're looking at the details, also looking into the future and considering lots of different points, things that are well known and not so well known, things that are very solid in terms of a data point versus things that are very vague to determine where the value is moving to. So again, we're looking for spending optimization or increasing for increasing or decreasing value. In other words, if we're going to get to a level of spending, what platforms are we going to be spending that on, and which ones are going to have the more value that's going to be returned to the business? Remember that value curve I showed you earlier, that there is going to be a maximum amount of spend that you're going to have that's going to return the most amount of value. But again, it's not only what you're spending, but it's on the technology that you're spending it on. And that needs to be assumed as well. And so what we're saying is that this is not a matter of throwing lots of resources at the problem and hoping that the value will be returned. That'll assure that the value won't be returned because you're spending too much money on the technology and you're not getting enough value back, or not spending enough resources on the technology. Therefore, the value doesn't come back because you're not making a dent in providing the capabilities that you need in the business. But a mix of the right technologies in an optimized way to find the best value, to be on that value curve as high as you can, which again, it's going to be very tough to do that, but as high as you possibly can. So again, you're getting business that's money that's returned back to the business. Spending optimization can create or drive value. You got to remember, we're not necessarily trying to outspend everybody. And the people who tell me that they're not able to be successful with cloud because they don't have enough resources, that's going to be a bit more difficult. That's going to be a bit more difficult argument to make, because in many instances, we're seeing people spending lots of money on cloud computing. They're still failing at cloud computing. Again, they're not getting the value back. Opportunities for innovation in cloud spending. In other words, how are we going to maximize the value of innovation and spending in the cloud? And then how are we going to measure that value of innovation that's coming back into our environment? So how do you measure ROI? Well, again, this is about your ability to innovate with your technology. You got to remember that the reason that we're leveraging technology these days is not only to automate various systems that run the business, but it's also to get to an innovation level that's going to provide more value back to the business. So we're looking to increase the value of the business through innovation, and we're able to achieve innovation through the creative use of new technologies such as cloud computing, but doing so in such a way we're optimizing the amount of value that's going to be returned back to the business. So cloud spending needs to be matched up with innovation. In other words, figure out how much innovation is going to occur from that cloud spending. And then we need to get at least 3 times the investment back from the value. 10 would be optimal, and I view that as an optimal thing, but the minimum amount of value that comes back to the business, and you can measure this, and of course it depends on your problem, the main things like that, needs to be at least 3 times the amount that we're spending. So again, we're dealing with innovation as value. So as migration, expansion, and maintenance of cloud-based systems occur, and they're occurring over the years, and in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have 70, 80% of our existing of systems are going to be out on the cloud. Many of them aren't going to be economically viable to migrate, and those will be either repatriated or never move off of traditional systems. The idea is to maximize the amount of business innovation that's coming back in the business. And if you think about it, IT is allowing companies to become better than they are, leverage more innovative processes, leverage more innovative technologies so they can become more valuable and therefore return more equity back to the shareholders and the stakeholders in the company, which is really why the business exists. So this is a business problem as well as a technology problem, and you need to balance the needs of both, but also consider where the business is going, what the business is going to be valued upon, and making sure we're making the right decisions to leverage the right technology as a force multiplier. And with that, I thank you very much.